So we've got 6 plugs here today for 4.3 liter. Need to be able to gap your plugs, so make sure you have feeler gauges for that. Flathead screwdriver we're going to use to do our impeller. Of course, a ratchet, extensions, socket to change spark plugs. Lower drive oil we picked up from local dealership. And we have impeller is already sitting in the boat, waiting for us to change it. Okay, we're in here to do the plugs. First thing we need to do, obviously locate all of our plug wires. Plugs are going to be behind each boot. To remove this plug wire, don't pull on the wires. You're going to separate that wire inside of this boot. You need to grab a hold of this boot nice and firm and just gently pull with a good amount of pressure. Boot's going to pop right off. Okay. Check this wire, see how it looks. This is the fresh wire was put on last season. Still nice and clean. The jacket looks really good. There's no cracking in it. If you bend it a little bit and you start to see cracking in here, you're going to lose electricity. The arc will actually jump right outside of this thing and ground itself. I'm going to take new spark plug, put your new spark plug inside of your socket. Okay, if you have a spark plug socket, it's a rubber piece in there, it goes ahead and hold the socket for you. We'll go ahead and stick this up in here. Locate your spark plug hole. Okay, I've already pre-gapped my plugs. And you want to do this part by feel. Okay, so you can start those threads without cross-threading it. You can also just do it with your fingers. Okay, it'll start. You can reach your fingers up in there and start it. Okay, now I can feel that it's touching. It has a little bit of tension on it. So I want to go ahead and stick my ratchet in the end of my extension. I'm going to snug it up. Okay. There is a crush washer in the end of that. That's all you're doing is seating that. Go ahead and take your ratchet out of there. Your socket out. That's one plug is in new. Now, every season, a little bit of dielectric grease. Okay, this is made for electrical items. Just put a little bit down in here. Okay, it will keep out moisture off the end of the plug, but electricity is still going to pass through it. Okay, go ahead and stick that boot right on here. Nice and gentle again. Okay. Feel it around. There we go, a click. That's what we're looking for. Okay? We're going to move on to the next one. Do the same thing. Nice, gentle, but you're going to need to be firm. Get the boot right off. This is your opportunity to be hands-on with everything. Okay? Over here, this belt's new. Unfortunately, I haven't done any video of that, but it was just replaced at the end of last season. But open it up. Look at it. Is anything cracking in here? Do you see threads hanging out of here? You know, what kind of condition does it look like? Is it soft? because it should still be semi-soft and sticky. It should not be hard and leaving like a black goo all over you. As you can see, a lot of belts have gone through this boat. There's still stuff stuck everywhere. Check all these lines, all the coolant hoses, okay? Are they hard, brittle, or are they soft and pliable, alright? Hose clamps. Okay. Hose clamps rust. Even if they say that they're stainless steel, certain stainless steel can still rust. And it's stainless. Doesn't mean it's never going to rust. Just means it's not going to rust as bad. Okay, so check these things. Make sure that they're still tight. And underneath, you don't want to go too tight because these can actually destroy your hoses underneath. They can chew through it with the little screw heads. Again, check plugs. Wires still attached well. Everything is plugged in. Stuff like this. Especially fuel lines. How do your fuel lines look? Your connections. You see any fuel seeping out of there? Anything that looks like it's wet? Stuff like that, okay? These items you want to make sure are in good repair as well. Okay. Now that hopefully we have instilled some confidence in you at least being able to change your own spark plugs. All 6 of mine have been completed. Like I said, took me about 10 minutes. Now we need to change our raw water pump impeller. Raw water pump impeller is located inside of this brass housing here on the front of a Volvo Penta. Now, newer ones, sometimes they're located on a different place, but this is on the crankshaft pulley, okay? And raw water comes in and comes out, goes to the pump. Because of winterizing, these were left undone so that water could drain out of them. Didn't want to leave anything in here, even though I keep this in the garage heated. Still do some precautionary things, and you don't want just water sitting, so I open those up. Now we need to take the front of this housing off. We're going to be gentle with it because it is just a brass piece and we don't want to bang it up. Look on the front of the raw water pump housing. There are 4 screws. There's one here, here, here. And there is one in between here as well. You can just get down on the floor. You can see it. It's in there. Nothing major. Flathead screwdriver, or you can use a socket. These aren't super tight, so a flathead screwdriver is usually enough to loosen these up. Okay. Go around the whole thing evenly just to make sure that all of our screws are loosened up. Alright. Okay, so they're all loose now. Now I'm going to work on just taking them all out. Okay, all 4 screws out. Okay, now this just pulls straight out. Okay, there is a O-ring seal. See, even just a little bit of water still left in there. Alright, go ahead and pull that out. Right there, you can see our impeller. This shaft is coming straight off of this pulley here. This just freely spins. There's a seal here and there is a bearing behind it. This is a replaceable part, but it's also a rebuildable part, okay? Because that bearing in there, the seals will let go and you'll start getting water going through, or you'll get air. And then you're not moving much water with this pump once that begins to happen, okay? Because once water gets through here and it gets into that bearing is no good, and you're going to hear this thing will whine. Alright, it's a pretty good sign. You'll end up with water in here. Okay. One thing I forgot to mention to everyone, before taking that off, there is a stabilizer arm that sits in here. And it comes out, and there's a little rubber thumb that sits inside of here, and it keeps this from rocking back and forth while the engine is turning. So you do need to take out 2 bolts here. I believe I took them out. They were 14 millimeters. If I'm correct, just take those 2 out, the whole arm comes off. The little thumb, once it starts to turn gooey after a couple seasons, go ahead and replace it. It is an item that you can readily find available. It was only a few dollars at my local dealership. So here we have the inside of our raw water pump, okay? We need to get this impeller out of here. We may need to just stick a screwdriver in there and pop that out. Right. Don't score up the inside brass that's in there. Just work this thing out. It's been sitting in there all winter without moving. There we go. Alright. Now, that's a good sign, even though I would not put this back in for another season. I have lost one of these in the past and had to fish every single one of these out of that block. Check the inside of your brass housing. Make sure that it looks good, that you haven't scored the inside of it or anything, because you do need a good seal with that inside of here. So this should all be nice and clean, no major gouges in it, nothing like that. As long as you're changing this impeller on a regular basis, there's no reason that this should be getting scored up anyway. Okay, it came off with the housing for the impeller before. You may have noticed it drop earlier in the video, but there is a rubber O-ring that sits on here that seals the two. We're also going to take this off and replace it because it is part of our new kit that we have. New impeller kit. Okay. Again, pick up all these parts at my local dealership because they're inexpensive. And it's very easy to walk in, walk out, get everything I need. Okay, brand new impeller. Set of directions. Still haven't figured out what I'm supposed to do with these. Or this. New O-ring. Okay. And lubricant. We're going to put a bunch of lubricant inside that housing when we put the impeller in it, so that the first time that we start it up, it's not going to be running dry. First thing, new O-ring. Okay. Go ahead and stick that on there. It does not need anything to seal it up. Alright, it's just going to get pressed in with the housing. Just make sure that it's seated in there well. So we don't want to get any folds in it or anything like that. Okay. Okay, now we need to get the impeller inside of the housing. Because I'm holding the camera with one hand, and I only have one hand to use the impeller. Basically what you're going to do is twist this over, and as you're turning it, these will fold over and it'll pop right down in. Okay, then once it's in there, we're going to take that little glycerin packet, the impeller lubricant, we're going to squirt it all inside of here so that this is going to have lubrication inside of it. I'll turn that again just to get it all worked in. We're going to stick it back on to the other end of the housing, and we'll put our screws back in. Okay, once you push this housing back in with your impeller inside, I did run a little bit of that glycerin lubricant around the inside of that, made sure that my O-ring was not pinched, and I have begun putting my screws in. Don't go crazy with these. Everything is brass. We don't want to make a mess out of it. We certainly don't want to break anything. Okay, once these are put in, it's like installing a tire. Okay, go around opposite sides, make a star pattern, make sure that they're all snug. Because you want this to fit nice and flat against the back side of the housing. Okay, so we're going to put these back, make sure they're in the right orientation. These are the way that they came off, because I keep this on here to make sure that I kept them the same. Go ahead and work these on. Back here, don't work this hose up to the point where it's going to be able to touch this. We don't want any kind of belt vibrations, we don't want any touching in here. So keep that back far enough that you can go ahead and tighten this hose clamp on here, but we don't want to do anything that could be destructive. When I do my hose clamps, I always prep for the next time that I have to be in here doing something. So I always take these and have them pointed where I can easily get to them. And we'll go ahead and tighten those down. Now they don't need to be tightened down too much, okay? Because you can, like I said earlier, you can cut into this hose, and we do not want to do that. Okay, now we need to put that stabilizer bar back on that I told you about earlier. This is that rubber thumb that I was talking about that can turn into goo. You don't want this to be all nasty, Okay, you want it to be able to fit in there nice, and it needs to hold this pump. If you can see, there are 2 bolt holes right here that is going to correspond with this. You'll go ahead and stick this in there. Now you may need to shift this pump a little bit. Okay, that's okay. Get those 2 bolts started. Extension in here. Once you get those in, everything will be fine, and this pump will be sitting exactly where it needs to be. Got my 3/8 inch ratchet. Got my bolts here for my stabilizer. I'll go ahead and stick my stabilizer in place and put these 2 bolts in. So like I said before, I'm kind of stuck in my garage today because of the wind, and I don't want to take the boat out. I'm going to have to deal with putting the cover on it to let it sit out overnight. But I still need to do my fuel water separator filter. Okay. And I always fill my fuel filter with fresh fuel before I stick it in to try and eliminate any airlocks, which will be going right here. Both of these pumps have been replaced on this boat because this is a major issue with the Volvo Penta. The paint inside of this mechanism starts to come off because of ethanol problems, because there is a liquid cooled part in there, and it gets hot, paint flakes off with the ethanol eating it up, and it gets clogged inside of everything. So always keeping fresh fuel in here. Always use something to eliminate ethanol if you fill up at a regular gas station. You know, regular precautionary stuff. So while we're in here, we'll check, make sure everything is good. All of our lines are good. This is a nice new line that will not get eaten up by ethanol. And new check valve in place. So unfortunately today I won't be able to do a video on changing that, and I will not be doing the lower drive oil on my outdrive. So hopefully we'll be able to get to that tomorrow when we get to pull the boat outside. And Sunday, we should be able to have launch day. Excellent.